Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Well, hi everybody, it's Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive episode 85. It is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful Monday, July 4th at 4:22 p.m., and it is 75 degrees outside, sunny and breezy. Yeah, this isn't supposed to happen in July, and we are enjoying it. Yesterday and today have both been like this. This has led to some outrageous, crazy fun on the farm. And I'll get right into that when we get to the blather. In the meantime, I want to remind you that your comments are very welcome. You can comment on the blog at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com, or you can go to our group on Ravelry. And in the warm thanks department this week, I have somebody who did. Thank you, Tiny Shiny Things. That was a great post. And very thought-provoking, but everything is really when you're me. No, that really was thought-provoking, but I have to admit, there are moments I feel like if somebody said, "Have you shut the door, Gemma?" I could have a 10-minute commentary. Nonetheless, it was a great posting and very thought-provoking. I believe this was on episode 84. And you ask, are we climbing? Yes, we are. That I laid off for a few months because of inflation, gas prices, yada, yada, yada. Also because I just lost the oomph. And so I made up my mind when I came back from Mammoth a few weeks back that I was going to start hiking and climbing again. Let me tell you something. When you're 61 years old and you stop that stuff, you lose strength. So those first few climbs after Mammoth, it was that same perdition you go through when you're first learning to climb. And the backs of your forearms, like the very tops, have pain that you didn't know you could experience. But we're through that now, and I'm really just strength building. You can see a picture of my beloved son climbing a 5.7 trail on the green there. His feet are on a rock that you can only grab with your fingers, and you have to put your whole weight on your fingers. So yeah, you do get a strong grip when you're climbing. And then there's a picture of me standing in front of the walls. That is not my son climbing behind me, but I'm standing in front of the walls that I typically climb. And the reason I'm doing that is to show you that I'm there. That is my climbing belt on my right shoulder. And I'm sort of squinting at the camera a little bit as I take my picture. But if you ever wanted to see the climbing wall that I use, that big one with the orange flashing on it, that's my wall. So yes, I am climbing again. And TST, may I call you that, Tiny Shiny Things? TST was pointing out, how do you keep doing that? And was also asking about pointers for socializing and how you tolerate being alone with yourself when the socializing isn't going the way you want to. And that seems like a really nice set of strategies to talk about today, I must say. But in the meantime, COVID, all the things you need to see, I got them. Get your kids their shots. At this point, if you're not getting vaccinated or you're not getting your kids shots, I don't have anything left to say. I'm laughing because that's my response to absurdity. Okay, but meanwhile, there are the links for the LA County record, myvaccinerecord.cdph.ca.gov, and also for the free COVID tests from the federal government. What's on my hooks and needles, you may say? Well, I finished the summer solstice ribbed hat. This was a beautiful skein in the colorway Paula, a DK weight from Dizzy Blonde Studios. As I was knitting this, I was having the weirdest deja vu. Well, yeah, it turns out many years ago, I knitted a hat in fingering weight in almost the exact same color. And that's why I kept having this kind of weird sense of I've been here before. And I love this hat too. That this is a pure rib. This is the Pearl Soho pattern, one of their freebies. And this is just a basic ribbed hat. Why am I doing that? Because it's in DK weight. And so I was looking for a ribbed watch cap in DK. And this is the one I found. I didn't want all ribbing. And you don't need to do this all in ribbing. This is cast on 132 stitches and then rib until your nose bleeds or until you reach 9.5 inches. I went for the latter. And then you start doing the decreases. There's nothing new here. If you're an experienced knitter, yeah, you could have made this one up. But really, I like that Pearl Soho worked out the numbers for me. The reality is, typically making this kind of hat, I would do the ribbing for 4 inches, then I'd go into stockinette. But I decided to see if I actually could rib that much without losing my marbles. Turns out I can. It was quite easy. I knit Continental, and I use Magic Loop. The reason I'm telling you this is when I knit Continental, purling is nothing. I find it much easier to switch between knitting and purling when I'm knitting Continental than when I'm knitting English, when I'm throwing. However, when I use Magic Loop, of course, what you have are two sides, and you're knitting a side and then turning it, pulling the needles, and knitting the other side. When I do that turn, to keep myself from getting ladders, I actually do knit or purl the first 2 stitches English style. Why? Because I get a tighter stitch and I don't get ladders. What is the moral of this story? Well, the first moral is, if you knit one way and you haven't learned the other, you might consider learning the other. That I started by knitting English and knitted through the back loop, was doing everything wrong, but things worked out fine. But eventually figured out the way I was winding my yarn was backwards when I was knitting English. That when you knit a stitch in English, you wind the yarn counterclockwise. I was winding it clockwise, so that resulted in a twisted stitch. I got over that after a few years with no problems. I knit sweaters that way. They were perfectly fine. But they look a little different than a conventionally knitted sweater, is all I'm going to say about that. And then from there, I learned how to do knitting Continental from the Sweater Workshop by Jacqueline Fee, F as in Frank, E-E, which I recommend to everybody. If you want to learn every basic skill of sweatering, the Sweater Workshop, it's a classic. And in that, she teaches you how to do Continental so you can do Fair Isle. And the interesting thing is, when I knit Fair Isle, it's true. My main color is riding on my right hand, and I use my right hand to throw. And my contrast color is riding on my left hand, and I use my left hand to pick. I do get slightly different tensions. As I said, my English, my right hand, is tighter. So I've learned over the years just to adjust for that. But that's how I started knitting Continental. And this cracks me up. For a long time I thought, I can't purl Continental. That would be too hard. I wish I could remember one of the normal attendees of the Cognitive Fiber Retreat ran into me at a now defunct yarn event that used to go on in Long Beach. And she just showed me. I went to a workshop, couldn't learn it in the workshop, and bless her, and I can't think who this was, sat me down and taught me in 5 minutes how to purl Continental, at which point I never looked back. And I have to say, there are times I knit English. When I'm doing the edging of a scarf, if I'm doing a stockinette scarf like the heart scarf, the Nora heart scarf, and there's 5 stitches on each edge that are in ribbing, I actually do the ribbing by knitting English. And then I switch into Continental to do the knitting. So make what you will of this. When I do Intarsia, I actually do most of it in Continental. But what I would tell you is it is a lot easier to do ribbing in Continental for me. And that means what I'm really telling you is you should experiment with this. That people get really crazy and dogmatic about their knitting. Like, oh, I must only knit English because the fastest knitters in the world in the knitting speed competitions always knit English, with one noteworthy exception in the last few years. And people come up with these crazy things. The reality is most of us are knitting the way we were taught. But when you were taught to knit, you weren't taught brioche. You were not taught to purl, right? In other words, you master one skill and you move on to another one. And so if you have mastered one style of knitting, I really recommend you go and master the other, because it is strange how versatile these are. It's just 2 sticks and string. And what you do with it is whatever you want to do with it, whatever is working for you, okay? But in the meantime, there is a lovely picture of me in the summer solstice rib hat, which will teach you that it makes my eyes jump out of my face. Fortunately, I caught them. But it is not actually my best color. It's a golden brown, and I love it. Dizzy Blonde, Laura does some of the best browns I have ever seen. I always like specific colors with specific dyers. And you can tell with Dizzy Blonde what I like, because if you go back through my stash, you're going to see all these golden browns. That she hits these red, orange, golden browns like nobody else. In progress, the Don't Know Yet. We are pretty close to 200 blocks. That will be July 19th. And I am caught up and probably about 3 blocks ahead right now, which is good because it means I don't have to take it with me on the airplane to Kansas next week to pick up the puppy. But we will see. I am only taking carry-ons, and so I'm only going to take one knitting project. The one I'm probably going to take is just either the Machida Country Cotton Shawl, which I am now 1 full skein into, or the Midsummer Socks. I suspect it will be the socks because that is the smallest to carry. I can hang the bag on my belt and takes the least intervention from things like scissors and whatnot. We will see. The Don't Know Yet is really zooming along, and I am getting really happy about getting that box of yarns out of my study so I can move something else in. I am not participating in Tour de Fleece. I am really focused on getting yarn out of my study by knitting it into things, which means there's probably going to be a donation box to charity too coming up. I have a lot of cowls and stuff that I'm not really wearing, and it's just about time to hand them on. How do you do that? You go to a poor neighborhood and you wrap them around tree branches and you walk away. Or you go to the downtown section in an area that is somewhat dilapidated and you wrap it around a tree or a bench and you walk away. Always works for me. In the meantime, let's see, there's a lot of things I'm not doing, like the Pennsylvania Dutch embroidery. I've got yarn wrapped for, I think, but I'm not sure, either another fickle knitter shawl, or a Haruni. I'm not sure which yet. I'm toying with it. I'm not touching the Bright Cherries brick right now. It's just sitting quietly. I mentioned the Machida Country Cotton Shawl. This is the Country Cotton Shawl pattern from Lion Brand. This is a free pattern, as they all are over there, although they no longer make country cotton. So if you want the link, you might have to go through my link in the show notes to get to it through my Ravelry page. I'm not sure if Lion Brand still lists that page or not. However, the Country Cotton Shawl was made to be done in cotton thread, 2 strands held together, which, if you're counting, makes fingering weight. So I use it for fingering weight, and I'm using an H hook. And let me tell you, 1 skein of the Malabrigo Machida in the colorway Renaissance made a perfectly fine 1 skein shawl, but the actual original pattern, I think, is a lot more than that and goes on for 47 rows. With 1 skein, I got to, I think, 31 rows, and then you put edging on it in the original, in the 47 row. So I'm looking at this and going, no, that's really 2 skeins of fingering weight, which is so great. I thought I had extra Machida. I don't. So I'm on that 2nd skein. I just started it today. There is a picture of me wearing the 1 skein version. It does not have any fancy edging. It's just what you get out of about 470 yards in 1 skein. So you can see if you look at that picture, 1 skein of your typical sock yarn will do this just fine on an H hook. But I'm going for the big shawl. You may wonder what happened to my original big country cotton shawl, which was done in cotton thread. I actually was at a Middle Eastern restaurant and I was wearing it around my neck, and they had a belly dancer, and she invited me to dance with her, which I did. And at the end of it, as a thank you, I gave it to her, and she was thrilled. She wrapped it around her hips and used it for the rest of the night. And so that went to a really good home, because if you've ever belly danced, you need a big hip shawl. It is a great thing to have. And if you don't feel like listening to yourself jingle, or if you feel like the jingle type of shawl is a little too heavy in hot weather, these shawls are great for that. I am just saying, but you got to go for the 47 row version. Okay, meanwhile, I've mentioned the Midsummer socks. The first sock, I believe, is past the ribbing at the upper cuff and is now heading down the leg, but I'm not really working on it. I have 2 hearts on the Sunnybank Love scarf. I am thinking that's going to be 3 hearts on one side, 2 hearts on the other. At the very bottom, instead of a heart, there's going to be a collie that I have an intarsia pattern for. Aren't I clever? Or I may duplicate stitch it on. It's going to be interesting to find out. I think I'm now good enough at intarsia that I can make it look good, but it may look better in a duplicate stitch. I was going to duplicate stitch the collie onto the hearts, and that may happen in a later iteration. Why am I not? Because the red yarn I'm using for the hearts is very fuzzy, and it makes it hard to see the edges of the stitch for duplicate stitching needle insertion. But at any rate, the Sunnybank Love scarf is coming right along and is rather attractive. I am using this ancient cashmere acrylic blend that I've had since 2008 in my stash, so that baby's got to go. Any of you who used to knit with our knitting group up in the Antelope Valley will recognize that yarn. And then on top of it, I found a bulky red alpaca merino acrylic, I think, cross that's just lying in my stash and will never go anywhere. So that became the red for the hearts. Okay, whizzing right along. As I have said, I am not participating in Tour de Fleece. The reason is my throat is very dry and scratchy, and I will be getting allergic responses from fiber up my nose unless I wear a mask when I spin or unless I spin outdoors. I'm just not in the mood this year. I really, really am cleaning out this study and clearing out room and using up stash. Now, the interesting thing is, I said this the same time last year, but I did do Tour de Fleece, and that was a way. I had a whole bin full of fiber, and I went through most of it. It was terrific, and I emptied out this bin and was able to put knitting yarns into it for additional storage. But I do have a big, big wad of fiber that I'm staring at right now in a big bag. It looks like it's a good 10 ounces. So I know I'm going to come back to that. The good news, I am waiting for the new Nano. It's supposed to come in October. Maurice's latest Kickstarter. And that will be great. The Nanos I had the original, and it was very good. Then I got an updated one. I can't remember what I got it. I didn't like it as much, but the Nano is a great thing. When you get a good one, when it's really cranking along, it is an amazing tool to take on an airplane. So I'm not going through my stuff. I had considered just taking a Nano on the airplane and spinning on the plane. But frankly, I'm going to be in first class. I'd have the room to do it. But I'm also considering maybe I just want to sit quietly in my little first class cubicle and watch TV and knit. We'll see. But I don't feel like doing the work to take that with me on the airplane next week. Under my favorite resources, you will find the link for Lisa Souza yarns. Lisa just put out a sensational colorway. All these pale peaches with just a faint breath of a light green in it and a little bit of light yellow, but absolutely gorgeous. I'm fighting the urge to go buy it in BFL. I told myself no more fiber. No more fiber. And I want to go through my fiber stash that I've spun and make sweaters, and I want to spin the rest of the fiber I've got, which isn't that much right now, but it's a lot of odds and ends before I buy more. Good old Lisa, this one will be around. I don't know. I worry about Lisa retiring, though. I have a link for Webs, because Webs, you always want to know Webs. That's where you get your supplies. And I'm not going to say the name of their competitor. Picks, who every time I buy their tools, they bust. But I do like some of their inexpensive yarns. So I have to tell you, my overall supplier is Webs. I don't care if I have to mail 3,000 miles away to get it. They never do me wrong. Also, I have a link for Sierra Cottons and Wools in Bishop. Yes, it's my LYS. Does that make sense? It's 4 hours from me. Just nod and smile. And then Wool & Company, because I'm feeling warm and fuzzy about that discounted skein of Machida. I just want to say. You should probably know about them. Dizzy Blondes, I think I just said that. Okay, so let's get on to the strategy. And I really want to answer what Tiny Shiny Things talked about. This is a little bit out of the norm, but this is emotional management as in long-term management. And I'm thinking a lot about what Tiny Shiny Things said. She didn't say all this. I don't want to stick her with my point of view is what I'm saying. But it was food for thought. And one of the interesting things I've noticed as I am aging is it is easy to fall out of the world. It is easy to get more and more isolated. And it happens for a number of reasons. Now, in my generation, it's going to be notable that we went through the pandemic. So people like me who are aging right now, we really fell out. We had a year of it. Most people, I don't think it's that drastic. And TST's comment was, you're really happy with your family. And I am. I have a 16-year-old son. He's really interesting. But also, I'm on 5 acres of land. We have a lot of privacy. And we also have a lot of hobbies related to these 5 acres. So that is part of the strategizing. There was a point in my life where I was very busy with the podcast, with the knitting group in the Antelope Valley, with the fiber retreat, and with my jobs. And I really just got a bit tired. I wouldn't say burned out. I think that's too strong a word. But also I started having to do some serious financial revamping to make our system work better. And that worked terrifically well. No regrets there. But that also led to toning down my social life. And at the same time, or shortly before it, the knitting group dissolved, as they do. Various people went various ways. And at that point, I just decided that I was going to rely on my friends from online and from my podcast, and just decided to narrow my scope a little bit. I felt like I was trying very hard, and I wasn't getting as much support. And then I also realized that I have a really nice cadre of friends from different eras of my life. Strangely, the oldest friends are the best. And I started focusing on those friendships. But I do live a distance away from those people. So one of the ways I would tell you is to if you're worrying about feeling socially isolated, I had to learn the lesson. Stop chasing the people who are not really that reliably your friends. And start re-strengthening the bonds of the people who have been your friends consistently. And it's interesting because you do become aware how your friendships have changed over the years. And you do become aware that some of them will not continue to exist. So, take that for what it is. What I'm really saying is identify your friends and treat your friends like they are your friends. Work consciously on strengthening those bonds. I found that I had some good friends from Sunnybank. And in the quarantine, though, when we tried to connect, I wasn't very good at talking to them about anything, except collies, that I wasn't good at talking about our day-to-day lives. Why? Most of them were retired, and I'm not. So, not the common ground I'd like. And the same is true in the knitting community. A lot of the knitters I know are financially more affluent than I am, and they're retired, and they're doing stuff I can't do and probably never will. So even though I consider them friends, I don't really fit into their worlds that well. Nonetheless, one of the lessons about this is that if you don't want to be socially isolated, you have to identify friends, and you have to pursue the friendships. Strangely, this resembles the moment in my life where I got my first PhD and became a college professor, which resulted in me uprooting from the very populous, chatty, comfortable, crowded academic community of Stanford, California, and going to Southeast Washington State, where I was the youngest member of my department by easily 15 to 20 years. And so I was very lonely, and they really tried to make me welcome. This is not up to my colleagues. They were wonderful. But it was a moment in my life where I realized that I'm alone. And if I don't work at strengthening bonds and keeping in touch with everybody, I'm going to be alone up here. And so I did. I had a big house. I invited people up for Thanksgiving week when I knew they were on break from Stanford. I wrote I can't remember if it was weekly or monthly newsletter, and I just tailored it to everybody. So I wrote one draft newsletter, and then I would just handwrite notes on all of them and send out like 20 of these every time. I had to really work at it. And one of the reasons I had to was I was in nowhere, Washington State on the Idaho border. Nobody was going to come if I didn't work at this. I also had to accept that the people around me were very busy. They were all writing PhDs at the time, or they had families and kids, for my older friends back from my Philly days. And I had to really work at pursuing those friendships, that they were busy. I couldn't be vain and say, why are you not pursuing me? I had to realize they weren't pursuing me. They loved me, but they were busy and they were distracted. And I had to keep reminding them, I am here and I am your friend. So again, one of the things I would tell you, if you're saying, well, I'm aging and I don't have the friendships I used to have. That's right. That's true for me too. Everywhere I work now, I'm older than everybody else in my job. Why? Most people in my profession don't stay in it 30 years. Our career expectation is 5 years from the time you see your first patient. Kids, I saw my first patient in 1981 when I was a paraprofessional in undergraduate. So I've been at this a long time. There are not a lot of me out there. So when I take a job now, everybody is much younger than me. They're not going to be my friends. When you're in your 30s, you don't want a 61-year-old girlfriend. You just don't. Okay. There are other ways to have friendships. Because I have a 16-year-old, there are the parents of the kids he's hanging out with. Yeah, they're all in their 40s. Yeah, let's go back to that part about wanting a 61-year-old friend. So I really work at the knitting community. I work at this podcast. I'm working at ASL. Why? That's a whole new community. I have a goal of I want to learn enough ASL to just be able to help deaf and hard of hearing people do things like fill out forms, because not all of them speak English. And so I don't think I'm ever going to be a world-class ASL interpreter. But I'd like to have enough to be able to talk casually to someone who doesn't hear. And I'd also like to be able to help with things, hardcore things like filling out forms and paperwork. I don't see myself translating during therapy or healthcare visits or anything like that. I don't think I have enough time to learn it that well, but we'll find out. And it may not work, but it's worth pursuing. Those of you who have been around long enough may remember that when I worked in the prison, I looked at becoming a physician's assistant because I wanted to be able to prescribe meds. Then I determined the cost would be too much, that we had to focus instead on my son's education. But I think you have to try out things and you have to stay in the world. So I think today's strategy is, number one, remember your friends, your real friends, the ones with staying power, and treat them like friends. Trust them, write to them, work on your communication with them. Don't judge them about how they communicate with you. Just do your side of the deal. And the other thing is, stay in the world. Make a podcast, join a class, learn a new language, volunteer somewhere. But I think you have to stay in the world and you have to actively work at your friendships. Because as you age, if you're not closely hooked up to a family, like you don't have 3 or 4 kids and they're all keeping in touch with you, or you don't have good relationships with them or whatever, or in my case, your kid is still young, then you have to really work at this skill. Now, in the meantime, the other issue raised by Tiny Shiny Things was you seem to be happy with just your family. Pretty much. I married the right guy. But again, I don't want to be morbid, but nothing lasts forever. So you have to connect with the world on several fronts. What did I really just talk about in terms of the ACT model? I talked about myself in context. I haven't always been this way. When I was in grad school, it was easy to make friends. I had people all around me who felt like I did and were working on a similar project. But in this context, I'm aging, and younger people don't seem to know how to deal well with me. I'm also very confident. I scare people. And I'm living in my present. I'm not saying, once upon a time, everybody wanted to be my friend. I'm saying, this is where I am now. This is a complication of aging. I'm also using my values. One of my values is autonomy. If people don't come to me, I will go to them. I believe in myself as an active force in my life. That is a value for me, which leads me to committed action. So I'm going to take action to fix the problem. So there we go. If those of you who follow the ACT model, here in the Fluffy Books, still working on the introduction to American Deaf Culture. I didn't get to read much this week. I did finish, I believe, the Enola Holmes series, the original run. I believe she put one out last year or at the end of 2020, which seems to involve Enola as older and working with her brother Sherlock. I can't recommend the series enough. It has its problems. It's not perfect, but it is really a fun read or a really fun listen. It's also got an interesting spirit of social conscience, which I really like. Now, the more you know about Victorian London, the more you realize how much you need a social conscience, I'm just going to say. I think it was 1 in 10 women was living on the streets as a prostitute. So the poverty is unbelievable. And the Victorians I think they're the ones who created this concept of the worthy poor, and that's how they get around their guilt at letting people starve in the streets. Really quite impressive. In the meantime, I did listen to Jane Austen at Home, and I finished it by Lucy Worsley. I am not always sure I agree with some of her conclusions, and the ending is very interesting. I had not realized how the end game went for Austen, and it's not scary, but it's interesting. Worsley sometimes is a little too cheery about it, but it's a great book. It's very worth reading. I'm really grateful that the biographies of Jane Austen have grown out of she was just a quiet, Christian, decent homebody, not bothering anybody and writing these miraculously brilliant books. That we've gotten a lot smarter, and that makes me happy. I feel like I'm reading something else. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, that's Ms. Marvel. That's actually in the something I really like, but the overlap into fluffy books. I watched the first 4 episodes of the Ms. Marvel series on Disney+. There are weaknesses and there are strengths. I really like the series, but not for the plot. Why? Look, guys, it's Spider-Man with a bangle instead of a radioactive spider. Why am I saying that? Marvel is tapped out on narrative. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Ms. Marvel, we've seen all this stuff before. We really have. Marvel is kind of tapped out on new narratives. And they have been for 40 years, so I don't know why this should change it. What they do, though, that is so right, is the culture. That they're trying to show you a culture that many Americans will not know. They're normalizing it, and they're also showing that it is integrated into the current American cultural scene. So in this case, it's Pakistani Americans who are also Islamic. And what I really like is everything gets into the mix. They really cover all the ground. I do believe that racism gets played out in every direction. There's racist shots at every single group. And what I find so interesting is instead of being in denial about it or justifying it or talking about it in the typical way, what they do instead is they kind of squint and say, is this really your concern? And where is it your concern when it is your concern? I've been trying to find a way to say this coherently, so I hope this comes out okay. But there are moments where, for example, they talk about problems for women inside Islam. They may be talking about problems for other people too, but I think because the protagonist is young and female. And at the same time, there is a very strong commentary of, however, if you're not us, that isn't your problem. And as I say that, we have to, if you're raised in the American culture I was raised in, you have to sort of pull back your sense of, oh yeah, those guys, Sharia law, they want to put us all in hijabs, all that kind of paranoia. You have to pull back on that and say, will you please look that the characters represent different approaches to wardrobe and requirements, and they talk about it lightly, but they talk about it. There's a very rewarding moment where a woman who wears a hijab says, I only know that when I put this on, I began to feel like my genuine self. I have heard other people, conservative Christian women, say the same thing about wearing bonnets, okay? In other words, you can start getting revved up about this, or you can say, this too is the choice of a woman. And so the issues, I don't want to call it a problem, the issues are visible. And the question of choice among women in their clothing and their rights and their behaviors is visible. But there is a nice, solid current of you don't have to solve this for us, mainstream white Christian culture. We're doing just fine over here. And I think that's the first time I've really heard a Marvel series say it this clearly, and it's always on the table. And it's really interesting. And the way they talk about the partition of India is very, very interesting. I do not agree with their interpretation of all of it, but that doesn't mean I'm right. It just means, okay, I need to go do some research, because there were some reasons there that might be valid. What I would say instead that is really key to it is, and I think they're trying to say this, to be honest, I hope I'm not just reading this in, is they're saying the British did this. Is that really the right of the British? That the British were trying to solve what they perceived as a problem, but they're outsiders. Like, where exactly did they get that right? And I think that's an incredibly valuable argument to make. They're really, really teasing out some issues in this series, and that's where the series is at its best. I wish we didn't have the boy genius white guy sidekick. He's a great character, but I wish he wasn't there. I love the acceptance of him by Kamala's family. I think that's really cool that they're showing that no matter who makes what remarks, these people are living side by side and integrating, and the culture is integrating them, and they are integrating into the culture. But I kind of feel like, why do we have to have always these boy geniuses? You know, Tony Stark and Reed Richards and Professor X and this kid. And I know why. They serve, plot point. They give us inventions. So, there's moments where I kind of go, eh. And like I said, you could predict this plot from beginning to end. Like all of the miniseries, they do this great opening where they give you the background, and I really enjoy these most of the time. And, then you get into senseless violence, and this time the backdrop is Karachi so far. Again, you sort of feel like, I don't know if we should be doing this to another culture. Anyway, it's really interesting. It is enormous food for thought, as you can hear. So, Ms. Marvel, the limited series on Disney, I like the character a great deal. I found it thought-provoking. I found the whole story, the cultural stuff, thought-provoking. I love the scenes in the mosque for many reasons. One is because that's what Catholic Church used to feel like when I was a kid, where everybody knew everybody, where the priest knew you by name, people were very friendly and mutually supportive. But, they were kind of in-groups and out-groups. Really, really interesting. My first thought when they were showing the mosque scenes is, these people could be Italians with better wardrobe. So, and yeah, I love hot colors with gold thread. What am I going to say? The clothing is gorgeous. And the music is really, really fun. So, Ms. Marvel on Disney, a lot of food for thought. Don't go in there looking for a terrific narrative. It ain't there. But it is worth it just to say, look, man, it's not all white people getting bitten by radioactive spiders. There's actually different perspectives on culture here and a lot of cultural thinking. Okay, other things I really like. I'm just going to move on, and I will talk about those next week. So we're on to the blather. Yeah, we're into this far enough to do blather. I did do a little house cleaning on the Ravelry group. I'm trying to organize the strategies and add them to the pages of the Ravelry group for Cognitive. So if you want to see the strategies in their simplest form, as I assemble them and list them, I'm putting them on pages in the Ravelry group. I believe I got the first 50 from this new series up this past week, so that felt good. I need to finish the list of the strategies from the old series. Not hard to do, fortunately. They are still around. And then I need to start doing the strategies from episode 51 and on. ASL, since I mentioned it, the classes begin August 22nd. The pup date, well, Captain. We started to look hard at what's going right and what's going wrong with Captain, as I said previously. So this week my husband said, give me $50, and he went to the pet store. And he bought toys. And we found out that, as my son always reported, Captain is a monster chewer. We got her big, heavy, weirdly shaped rubber Kongs with gaps in them to stick treats in. She loves these things. So we are really collecting toys. She surprised me last night with all these toys. She came into my study and started trying to chew up the carpet, like literally lift it off the floor and chew a hole in the wall-to-wall carpet. More toys that she does chew when she's anxious, and it calms her down. She is anxious. She has that border collie, high energy, high anxiety. We do know we need to start working with her. I had gotten her a training choke, and I don't know where it went. So I need to find another 20-inch training choke. Please be aware, if you're not familiar with dog training, we do not choke dogs with a chain. We put it around their neck, it's slip, and what you do is called a pop. When they do something wrong, you just jerk your hand up and drop it. No choking, just a sort of pop. What you do is you get this noise from the chain like a click click and a tightening around the neck, but it is not choking. Please don't think I'm out there dragging dogs around by chains, choking them to death, okay? No, not cool. Interesting thing about using a choke chain is an intelligent dog learns really fast on it. They learn to identify the noise. And so if I don't even have the choke on the dog and I make the pop sound, the dog will immediately stop and take stock. And there are a lot of good variations on these, but many people use them badly. So first thing, if you're going to use a choke chain on a dog, please go to a competent training group and learn how to use it, because it is not there to choke your dog or to gag your dog, to give it an instant of choking. It is there to make a noise under the dog's ear. The part that makes the noise rides under their left ear, and to be a sort of surprise, but not a pain, okay? Please get trained in this. Having said that, can't find her choke, but anyway, that was one of the goals, was to start working her. And with Queenie, that'll be very important. I do have what's called a martingale for Queenie. You can't put a choke on a collie, too much fur. It won't ever catch. It won't even make the noise. But that's okay. Collies are usually ridiculously easy to train. So are border collies. And Queenie, we're looking forward to it. Captain's already showing those signs. Speaking of training, today was dog washing. So the boys started it, and then we realized it is a 3-person job. So we went out and we dry brushed her. Now, we thought Captain did not have a true Newfoundland coat. Boy, were we wrong. She is shedding outrageously, and it's very like Baron's fur. I could easily spin it. I didn't. I should have. It was very, very soft and fine. But I don't have the oomph right now, and hopefully we've got a few more years to work on that as fiber animals go. But instead, we took shedding rakes and just raked her, my son and I, while my husband held her. And then we tried to wash her, and we had a really nice, gentle dog hose, and she freaked out. She has been washed in the bathtub several times and is fine with it, but did not like a quiet, slow, low-pressure hose. Can't figure that one out. Needless to say, everybody got wet. The front patio is well flooded, but it's all concrete, and it's draining, and it will drain into the spearmint patch, and the soap is biodegradable, so that's all cool. But she is now washed. And so am I. So is my patio. So is my son. So is my husband. So is the porch swing my husband sat in. So are my shoes. So are my son's shoes. So are my husband's. The Yosemite trip, looking better. We have several candidates to throw hay. That's coming up in September. Queenie's big road trip. Oh my gosh. I will be on the plane a week from today. I'm so scared. But I'm going to make it work. Now, the first challenge is getting from the airport to my hotel, and then the next day getting back to the airport, because if I don't pick up a rental car the first day, I save about $140. So, yeah, Uber, we'll see how that works. In the meantime, Queenie is coming, assuming she still fits in the carrier. And we have just about everything for her. We have special vitamin wafers. We have special puppy food so she doesn't go through trauma switching over from her own food. And I am going to try to vacuum seal some, I think, and take it with me in my carry-on. I am hoping to travel all carry-ons, so looking pretty much like I'll just be taking socks. If I have finished the Machida shawl that I'm crocheting, I'll definitely be knitting socks. I'd rather knit on an airplane. I find knitting just a little more soothing. And I don't think there's any issue with this in my carry-on, as far as I know. So this week is going to be calling the airlines, making sure there's nothing more I need from a vet or anything else. And we're really just getting ready to get there and get the new puppy in the house. Minerva gets the last word. You got to see this picture. She just was walking towards me on the back of my love seat in the study, and she just has that expression that she just looks like, I am Minerva and I own all of this. And, well, Minerva, it's your last week with the Easy Dogs. Minerva gets along with the dogs. Always has. Minerva, when she was a kitten, she simply colonized Blankets. Blankets doesn't chase cats. Blankets just looks aggrieved when a cat lies on her. I have pictures of Minerva lying against Blanket's side as though Blankets were her mom. Blankets looks horrified. Eleanor and Minerva got along fine. Eleanor was here with Fearless, and Fearless basically sorted Eleanor out. Minerva has sorted out Captain. Captain every now and then will rush her, but Captain is not really interested in chasing her and does understand that thing about the knives in the toes that cats tend to have. And Minerva is equipped with a full set. So Minerva is waiting for Queenie, and Minerva will no doubt help us train Queenie. So the next time you hear from me, let me think. Yeah, you will hear this coming Saturday, whatever that is, July 9th or 10th, whatever it is. 9th, I think. And so after this episode, we should have Queenie. So, everybody cross your fingers that this all goes well. In the meantime, people are masking up again in LA County. It's very noticeable. No mandates yet. Haven't heard too much in the news, but people are getting a little nervous. So as my husband pointed out today, the numbers must be on the rise. We've had a really pleasant 4th of July. We all went out to brunch together. We all kind of slept in, did a little house cleaning, went out to brunch, came home, did a little dog cleaning, and have been puttering. And here I sit recording this. So everybody, please, if you need to, wear your mask. Please pay attention to the mandates. Get your shots. Wash your hands. Socially distance. Yeah, I still have patients getting COVID because they went to crowded bars. And I'm not going to go into how could you not get the shots, but actually some of them did. So all I can say about that is, I will repress my sense of the absurd, but please get your boosters. Do what you gotta do, because most of all, please everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.